Right, welcome everybody. Today we've got Dale Hayward on here. Welcome, Dale. Welcome to our show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Um, Dale, I wonder if you could. I was going to introduce you, but I think you might be able to do that even better. So I wonder if you could just give us a brief sort of background of your history and your bio.
Sure. Yeah, well, I'm Dale Hayward. I have an animation company called Sea Creature with my wife, Sylvie Trouvé. This is where we create ads and films and music videos and documentary sequences. And we specialize in stop motion animation in particular. So we've worked on, had the wonderful opportunity of working on projects like Netflix's Little Prince and with clients like Mattel and Hot Wheels and Nike. And yeah, so it's been a really great, really interesting time. I've been working in animation since 2003, and sort of like 20 years now, I guess, which is pretty crazy to be at it. And I never thought stop motion would something be I'd continue in. I thought when I fell into it, it was like, okay, this industry's got 5 years max,
Yeah.
and 20 years later, still at it. And yeah, so it's a really interesting industry.
Yeah. I'm curious, Dale, with all the technology we see popping up everywhere, how has that impacted stop motion?
It's technology has always helped stop motion in a way because we've always embraced whatever new technology is out to that sort of changes our life and makes it simpler. So when digital cameras came out, they were all over it. I mean, it's crazy. Everybody's got an old story of using, a 16 mil or Super 8 to try and shoot their stop motion on film, but on camera, on a digital camera, it's so much more accessible. Now you've got your phone, it's right there in your pocket. So whatever technology we use, we can kind of stop motion can still, whenever you can use reality in there, stop motion is going to use it. So we use motion control quite often. We use DMX to control our lighting. We've used 3D printing for our faces. And so I think now I've also dipped into using virtual screens for our environment.
Wow.
So, and with AI, I mean, right now we use it in a sense of for concepts and helping to develop ideas. But I mean, I think it's always stop motion survival has always been because it adapts with the technology. It
Yeah.
uses it as well. So.
Yeah, I remember when sort of CG was coming on, and then even 2D had new programs hitting it, and we think of VFX where it's changed so much from physical effects to digital, and
Hmm.
to your point too, I was wondering what happens to stop motion, and
Hmm.
and I remember seeing someone with a bunch of 3D printed heads
Hmm.
and multiple expressions, so that because I've done some stop motion a million years ago, and I remember like we had to keep changing the faces and changing the faces and
Hmm. Hmm.
so I could imagine if you can 3D print 20 or 30 or 100 expressions, the job becomes a different enterprise for sure.
Well, that's it. Actually, that's a good way of putting it because it really doesn't make it easier. It just
Right,
makes a small team have a bigger output.
right.
So yeah, with our film Boma, there between two characters, we had about 1,500 faces.
Wow.
So it was bonkers. It was crazy. And so because we did full face, so they weren't divided between upper half and lower half, it was these full face replacements. So we just go through all of the emotions, and because you have a different mouth shapes for different eyebrow movements because it's a whole face.
Yeah.
So it ended up becoming a huge volume of faces. And that was another thing we used technology. We developed like a Python script that would sort of recognize duplicates, and makes it a lot easier for us to create the faces.
Right.
So again, that's when the nice thing with 3D printing is that you really start to meld the two worlds.
Yeah.
And I mean, with studios like Leica in Portland, Oregon, they tend to do a lot of their background characters are now just in CG, where their foreground and main characters are all in stop motion.
Hmm.
So they're able to match the textures on the characters and the faces, and so it's a really seamless way of working too. So.
Right. Wow.
Mhm.
Excellent. So it's not your grandfather's stop motion anymore, I guess.
No, no, not at all. I mean, it was nice recently on a commercial job that we were able to connect all of the lights in the set on our DMX system. So
Yeah.
even if it was with a live action team, because it was a mix of stop motion on our sets and some live action sets, we could use the same system that the live action team was using with DMX and just work it straight into Dragon Frame and control all of the lights and everything. And it worked. It was a nice bonus. I didn't expect that we were going to have to do that, but because we had the tools, we could just plug and play and it was ready to go. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was really nice.
Amazing. Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any projects you've worked on in the last few years that are near and dear to your heart? I'm sure a lot of them are, you get deep into these things as you're building them,
Mm-hmm.
but, spending a year or two or three away from them, are there any of them that strike you as, wow, that was really a big moment for us, or something interesting happened during the show that you remember distinctly?
Mm-hmm. Well, recently we were in New Zealand, in Christchurch, New Zealand, working on a show called Kiri and Lou. So I was animation directing a small team in the city, and it was a claymation show. And it was it's a super. If you ever get a chance, if you've got kids or grandkids, it is such a fantastic show. It's written really for parents and adults, not necessarily the 5-year-olds, but
Right.
it's super cute. It was just an amazing opportunity to bring my wife and kids with us and work on
Cool.
another production. And so that also has, like, because it's claymation, you're using, it's real clay, so you have this much more of an element of humanity into it, and it's this mixture of kind of 2.5D, we called it. It's 3-dimensional because it's clay, but it's on a glass surface, and
Yeah.
where the camera's pointing down. So you think of it like a 2D animator, but yet you're still dealing with 3D volumes.
Yeah.
And so that also had another interesting process with the DMX lighting, so we could avoid green screen with it. And so that was a really nice system that was put into place from the production. And the crew was a very international, because there wasn't much stop motion talent in New Zealand in general, because it's pretty small.
Yeah.
We had all, like myself, had to come from elsewhere. So it
Right.
was a really great international team that made it happen. So that was pretty cool. And so while we were there, because New Zealand is just, it's incredible. It's Middle Earth. It's beautiful. So we were commissioned by the Les Summit de Cinéma d'Animation in Montreal. So it's a Summit Animation Festival. They wanted us to do the festival trailer. And so since we didn't really have much of our gear, we had a camera and a laptop and a tripod. So that's enough. And so we were collecting all of these different pieces of flora and fauna, dried leaves and flowers. And so we started using that, and we would shoot on location in the natural light, this kind of festival trailer. And it was really great to be able to just sort of use a zero waste production and just make it wherever we were in the
Mhm.
environment. So whole different world, one that's very controlled in a studio, and one that it's like, well, it's just a terrible weather day, we can't shoot. All right, okay, next day.
Wow.
And so really being open to what we get out of it. So uh, it's nice. We tend to do that a lot, where we'll tread between a more traditional linear kind of TV model. That's where we're trained on TV series and advertising, and there is definitely still a need for that sort of thing. And then we have these auteur, independent, different kind of projects that come our way. And that's what we kind of got our training in Toronto and working on TV series and ads there. And then what drew us to Montreal was the NFB, the more the independent life sort of mentality and lifestyle, and that sort of thing. So working with the NFB really kind of opened up our opportunities and our eyes to what animation can do. And it's
Mhm.
not just selling something or selling a TV show.
Right.
It's a medium, it's an art form. So yeah.
Excellent. Excellent.
Mhm.
Let me see if I can screen share for just a second. Maybe I can pull up your website. Can you see that there, Dale? Is it
Mhm.
popped up? Okay, great.
Yep.
So yeah, just wanted to show some of the visuals and give people an idea of such a fun site because you've done advertising and movies and television shows and that broad spectrum.
Mhm.
And you and I've talked about this before. Being a creative person, that variety probably spurs more ideas and is kind of like delightful. But don't let me forecast that. But you tell me, do you really enjoy the mix? Because it's not always the same, right? It's not like
Mhm.
unionized job where you're going to work and doing the same facility or the same thing every day.
Hmm.
And I'm sure it's pros and cons, right? You're constantly having to shift your gear potentially or sets and things like that. But tell me, a little bit, or tell anyone watching the show, that sort of thing. What do you enjoy maybe the most, and or pros and cons around that, different projects?
Yeah, for sure. It's a rare opportunity to be able to tread between the different industries. I always look at it as being, even with the TV series or the ads, which are a little bit more of the regular model, and so especially TV series, there is a sort of, it's animation. These are long-term scales. You're learning so much during that time, and I apply that learning into into our more personal projects, and those give me the confidence to be able to do this sort of on the fly, making it up, sort of feeling more artistic way of approaching something, is because I've done the work in the sort of regular, quote unquote, regular
Right.
world. Um, but the variety is really what I look forward to, for sure. It's why I like having our own studio, and that different, yeah, because probably life would be financially a lot easier if I just
Right.
went off and got a job. And but the variety, that and that control, the ability of flexibility of life and work is really important to
Right.
us. So it's worth it.
Excellent. Great, great. And I'm curious also, as directing your own shows, because that's a different hat to wear.
Mm.
If there's any directors watching, um, what are some of the points you might have about what, I mean, from your perspective, directing a show, what are some of the challenges in that? And do you enjoy it more than actually just being hands-on creating the work? Or,
Mm.
because some people I find, I remember working in a VFX shop where some of the supervisors were doing their own rotoscoping. I'm like, what are you guys doing? They're like, it's meditative, man. I need to just zone in on this and just roto for a bit to block out all the noise. But so I'm curious, what's the balance look like from hands-on to directing shows?
Yeah, totally. It is a transition for sure, and I think we've had it. At least I've had it over the last few years of just as focusing on the business rather than the work that we do. And that's happened where more and more I'm wearing the producer, director hat, hiring out more people, and working with teams as much so I can sort of manage other projects. But
Yeah,
I definitely miss it. And, it's easy to get pulled back in to the studio and get in my hand. I need to definitely work with my hands on
yeah,
things. So sitting behind a computer too much, it definitely, it wears. But, the having the balance of the two is really, it gives me a whole different sense of perspective when I'm doing a budget, and
right.
when I'm talking with a client, because I know literally how to make it. Then I'm just willing to now walk away from them being more hands-on than I would be in the
Yeah,
past. And there's definitely, you have to kind of commit to it. There's a decision you have to kind of
yeah,
make, to go over to the other side
right,
more
right.
often. But more then it's more that not just means my job is different in the business. It's more on the project creation rather than, um, I guess, the fabrication,
Right,
side of
right. Sure, sure.
things.
And your wife, do you separate roles specifically and she does certain tasks and you do other ones?
It's not as linear sometimes, because we're both creatives. We both started in as animators in it. She's trained as a photographer,
Ah,
so being in the studio has just come second nature for her. And so the thinking about it on the producing side of things, I've been wearing on that hat more and more on projects, just out of necessity. We are looking for having a producer to be able to take on more of that role on our projects, but usually it's been me, because it again, it's almost because every project is so different. Then
yep,
we're like, well, even if we get a live action person, they're so used to a very simple like process that's made out, and it's like, no, not this time. I need totally
right.
different tools, different things. So it's been a bit a little tricky whenever we worked with people in the past on that sort of stuff. But
Yeah,
yeah, she has her strengths, I have my strengths, so we sort of hand off things so we're not stepping on each other's toes in the
right.
studio. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking, you'd have to at some point sort of define some turf occasionally, I would
It is.
think.
I mean, but
Yeah,
there is sometimes where, yeah, usually as a stop animator, if you're in the studio and there's multiple characters, it's all you. You handle
Right.
the whole thing. It's your kind of performance for the moment.
Yeah.
And when it came to our, so rarely do you get the chance to work like as two animators on the same set at the same
Yeah.
time. It doesn't really happen too often. And when it came to our film Mother, we had discussed and talked about it. We co-directed it. We animated the whole thing together. We designed it all together, like everything. So it was such an organic brain melding between the two of us. There were shots that I still can't remember if I did it or Sylvie did it. Like you just
Right.
can't. It's like we both did. Like we
Yeah.
talked so much about it. It may have been her hands, but it was my brain,
Right.
like
Right.
kind of thing. And so that's a really fascinating. We're really fortunate to have that opportunity, and that we're not trying to kill each other. Like
Right.
we can still live and work. And even on this last commercial job, I was literally animating her hand, and I was like in the scene because it needed some live action hand in there, and it was really like this really kind of little sweet romantic moment of like we're working together, we're making things together. I'm moving her hand around,
Right.
like
Right.
it was a really yeah, it's really funny.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Good. So I'm curious also from the perspective of your clients, because it seems like a wide kind of spectrum. Um,
Mm.
is there a lot of regional work you do in Quebec specifically, or is it Canada wide, or is it North American or international? Or, if you had to break it down, or does it, again, I would imagine changes maybe from year to year, but I'm curious if there's a sort of sweet spot or something like that where the bulk of the work looks like this.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to ads, it can be really diverse. So we try to keep our contacts open as much as possible in Toronto. So we'll jump over there and do projects there, but primarily it's still in Quebec, within the ads world, and even because of our relationship with the NFB and more doing more things with the grant systems, we're just getting to know the Quebec system more.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and then this job of going to New Zealand was a rare occasion, but a lot of there is definitely times in the industry to have to kind of jump ship and go to different countries, different hotspots in the
Yeah.
industry.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's in Quebec for the most part. But
Got you. Great.
yeah.
Okay. Um, anything that you could share that you've worked on in the last, 3, 4, 5 months? Just if anyone's watching and they want to check out your most recent stuff, what would that look like?
Mm. Well, then the most recent, it hasn't been released yet, but it was this commercial that we did last time. It was for checks, which was just a fun way of combining some live action and stop motion together, and a lot of miniature sets that we had to build very quickly.
Yeah.
And then last year we did a spot for a credit union in the U.S. in Tennessee Valley, so TDFCU, and it was a really fun chance to work with needle felting, which is this technique of you're just basically pin pricking your puppet's face you're pushing with a pin this wool into the foam of the face. You're literally
Yeah.
millions of times you're
Wow.
poking these cute little animals,
Right.
and to make this kind of and the felt is a really interesting material because it can act like hair, it can act like fur, it can act like clothes, it can act like skin, and so it's like almost like a furry clay,
Yeah.
almost that you can meld it. And there's some animators that really actually play with it and animate it.
Hmm.
Um, but anyways, that spot was just a bunch of furry animals in a forest, and it was just great. There was a nice couple sequence of projects that we had that just sort of tied into that one, and that's what we like, taking those commercial jobs, and then those help fund the more personal projects. So we did a few music videos, mainly with Kid Koala, which is a DJ out of Montreal, and we did one where it was just silhouette. We filmed him and we used his silhouettes images, and we rotoscoped that with vinyl record shards of him playing on the DJ and everything. So it was meticulously a literal house of cards of piles
Yeah.
of vinyl record shards and white pieces of paper, and
Nice.
trying to get these images. So yeah, we really the stop mo just has this humanity to it. It has this level of that someone did it. There was a person behind it, and we really love showing the behind the scenes and showing that it is the craft behind
Yeah.
it. And I think more and more when you bring up the technology, we get more jaded with what we see. We just expect all these amazing things. So once you know that a real person was behind that, it
Yeah.
changes. it totally changes your perspective on what it is. And yeah, we like to sort of make the most of that and let everybody know that there's people behind it, all the crafts people,
Yeah.
and that's really important to the art form, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I think of what happened to visual effects, where we look at like the first Star Wars movies where they were all done physical effects,
Hmm.
old wires and rigs, and then somewhere in the early 90s or so, it's finally the software gets to a point where they can do digital doubles and things look relatively realistic. And
Hmm.
but yeah, I always think of stop motion being so much more tactile, right? Because a
Hmm.
human is intimately involved with frame by frame by frame, so it's definitely a whole different art form. I'm curious also,
Hmm.
you run a school, am I correct?
Hmm. Hmm.
And is that something that's ongoing or seasonal, or if someone was looking and they wanted to understand stop motion and maybe take a course, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's called C Learn Academy, so we're keeping the whole C brand part, and it's a right now it's a level one course on specifically just teaching stop motion, leading you to puppet animation. So there's kind of, I guess there's kind of two different ways of looking at stop motion. Is ones where it's just object animation, you're just moving things, and there's another thing where you're building characters, and the characters have emotion, and you're feeling weight and that sort of thing. So we start off with very much more elementary basics with objects. So then you don't uh, you have to be too concerned with having the puppets. The fundamentals are the same. And so it's a nice way of kind of not being complicated. So we just do, the bouncing ball, but we use a coin for that.
Right,
So or any type of circle. And it doesn't even
right,
have to be squash and stretch. It's just you'll get that feeling.
right,
And then, so the course also has, for every lessons that you send our way, we give you a video recorded feedback on the work. So we're teaching the students not just what's wrong, but how to improve it. And
right,
so that's a much more, it's not just one-sided form of education.
right.
And yeah, and we do some workshops as well with that. So sometimes they're the weekend workshops or on location. But yeah. And we have
Excellent.
a level two in development right now. It's kind of taking the side seat because I got, work
Get
got
busy.
too
Yeah,
busy or in New
yeah,
Zealand and everything, but we are dying to get back into it and keep that going. So
right.
we have level one is available right now, and with the feedback. And,
And is it sort of, I would imagine people work remote and they
yeah,
is it sort of self-guided, like they've got modules to run through and then they would submit
yep.
when they're done the module. So there isn't specifically a time frame, is there? Like the semester ends and starts, it's more like self-guided sort of. Am I correct?
Yeah, it's self-guided, 8 lessons. So we're thinking of actually, we wanted to keep it open, but we're actually thinking of now starting to set maybe some time frames
Sure.
for it. I think deadlines are important. I think it is
Yeah.
part of the industry. And we
Yeah.
do a lot of some of the subjects, we kind of trade off what the way we kind of looked at it was we wanted to see it in a sense of like how a stop motion animator would think about making stuff. So it's not just animation in stop motion. We're
Right.
talking about the cameras, we talk about the sets, we talk
Yeah.
about the environment that you're going to be working in, and so lots of little tips here and there, and little tools, and all these little tricks of the differences of the nuance. So I really felt like it's not just animation side of it. It's how do you there are a lot of because you're dealing with reality,
Right.
you're dealing with the real camera, you're dealing with a tripod, you're dealing with the lights.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of little specialties that you kind of need to learn, not full on in depth, but enough
Sure.
to get you started. And we
Yeah.
don't try to these we know these are not films, these are just exercises, but you need the sort of fundamentals of things in order to make them work. And yeah, and it's been really fun. It's really great. We've been able to even work with some of our students as well already, and it's great to be able to hire them on some projects. Because
Mm.
again, because everybody is working from home, and one of the very first exercises that we get is, I want to see your setup. Show me a picture
Right.
of your camera, your
Yeah.
setup, and just to see what you're dealing with. How many is it standing on boxes, or is it a real
Right.
full table? That changes what my expectation is of the work, right?
Ah, right.
And then also along the way, I get to see. the students share, oh, I got a new light or I got a better camera and everything. And when it came to COVID, it forced us to also open up like, well, maybe we can do some remote work. And when we had our Hot Wheels project, we were able to farm out to just send them exactly the gear that we needed and the equipment, and we knew their setup, and so we could just, they could work remotely on that, and that was
Yeah.
really that was nice,
Yeah.
nice.
It reminded me of like in high school, we took over someone's kitchen table for about 3 months. And,
Yeah,
every day the mother would be like, just give me a date, because there's a holiday coming up. I'd like to use the table again. We had, all our lights and stuff set up, and eventually we got moved to the basement. But
yeah, yeah.
yeah, there was a while there where she thought it was really cute at first, and then she was like, "Okay, give me back my table." So I hear
Yeah,
you.
those solid kitchen tables. There's nothing
Yeah.
better,
No,
those
nothing.
are
Yeah.
rock solid.
Exactly. Exactly. It was great. We could clamp everything on the sides, and we had
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Cool. I wondered if you could talk about Little Prince a little bit.
Mm.
Working on that because it's such in my world, beautiful film. Like it's just and we talked about even some of the fabric, the movement, and things like that. And so
Mm.
I wondered if you could, if there are any highlights for you or memories from working on it and that you could share.
Yeah, it's a beautiful film. Yeah, so I mean, our part is it's mainly a CG film, and the stop motion part is about 20 minutes edited throughout the film, and it's kind of the story that's being told from the little girl to the little girl by the aviator who's very old at this point. So you're getting the story of the little prince and the aviator when he's crashed in the desert. And so along the way, the sort of integral idea with the Little Prince was that it had to be different enough from the CG, but not too drastically different that it would be too much of a departure from a three-dimensional world. And I think that's why it wasn't ever really a 2D. There's a sequence of a little bit of 2D at the very, very beginning, but the author Antoine Saint-Exupéry's illustrations are so unique, but they're very much to him, and I think they wanted to add something more to that magic, and that's where the stop motion kind of came in. And so then it led itself to being, okay, well, what can we still tie ourselves to the original drawings? And it was like, well, paper. And so paper became that kind of core element to
Mhm.
the stop motion. And now that ended up led to our goal was, can we do everything out of paper? I remember constantly talking about like things, well, it could be totally easier if it was in another material, but it's not this world. And so we had to make everything out of paper. And so it
Wow.
came down to not just the hair or the clothes, but even the faces were molded out of a paper clay. So even that was as much, and that was a real nightmare as far as molding is concerned, because it did not react as well as other like plastics or a resin would, but they still found ways, and all the faces were all hand painted.
Mhm.
So it really was the sets, the all of it was paper. The only thing I think our hands were plastic, but otherwise it was just so amazing. It was really fun to see what you could get away with. How do you make water out of paper, and get across that feeling of wet, but without it actually being wet, and
Mhm.
so it's always kind of the magic I find about animation and stop mo in particular, is that you can break your reality of what you think it is, and you forget that it's actually just a doll moving, that it
Right.
has personality, and now it makes you cry, and
Yeah.
that's really it's pretty magical for that, I find. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that whole sort of, definitely takes you away. Like reading a good
Mhm.
book, it kind of, if you get right into the story and into that effect, and that's what I remember was just it was the look was, you bought into it, and it was just this beautiful sequence or two in
Hmm.
there. And
Hmm.
so cool.
Yeah, it was amazing to have a project like that, and we could really get the talent in Montreal that we know we had, and it was a great project to just really get us all dig deep into and show the world that we can do kind of high class, world
Yeah.
class kind of projects,
Yeah.
and that it's super unique. So that was really yeah, it was a wonderful opportunity. We were really glad
Great.
for that. Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
Good. Well, I wanted to wrap up shortly. If there's any other things you want to talk about, what you're working on now, or what the next year looks like, and also
Mhm.
if anyone wants to find you, I was going to say your websites are CSEE seacreature.ca.
Hmm.
and also c-learn.com. And they can find you, of course, Dale Hayward on LinkedIn as well. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I really thank you for being here and having a conversation. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we sort of wrap?
No, it's been really great, Lance. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, our next project, so we're working on, we really want to in a growth phase. So we want to get on larger series or larger projects so we can sort of build a bigger team
Yeah.
for longer term. And we have a project in development right now called Bon Appetit. And right now it's actually not actually in stop motion, but it's in animation, of course, more of a collage feeling. It just sort of worked best in digital collage. But that's something that we're really developing, and we're toying with it being a short form vertical format series because we know linear TV is sort of really dying and we're finding
Mm,
alternatives. But the medium of short form and episodic is really fun and exciting. And I think that there's lots of room to play in the sort of social media vertical format space. And so that's where we're kind of our next real sort of big project that we're dying to get off the ground. Um,
great.
yeah, yeah,
Good. Well, we'll look forward to that too. Thanks again,
awesome.
Dale. It was a pleasure having you on chatting with you today. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much.
Bye bye.